Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com.
Welcome back to the Global Indian Podcast, home to the greatest conversations and the official platform for open and liberal minds. Because yes, let's face it, we are everywhere. Now, as you know, every single week we plunge ourselves into the human experience behind our perceptions of identity, take a second look at the countries we now call home, and also tackle the big conversations. Well, over the course of the last couple of weeks, there's been a general theme that has been emerging. And it kicked off with the environmental impact that us humans are creating on the planet. Now, as you may remember, a couple of episodes ago, Mida spoke about the dangers of deep sea mining. Mida, as you remember, was based in Canada, and she was talking about the environmental impact and how restaurants were engaging in more of a sustainable way moving forward. This conversation was taken up further afield by a guest here in the UK, which was part of the Green Party. And the same discussion came up. So what I did was go back to the Oracle, that is the internet right now, and say, well, who can I find as an expert to help guide us through as an audience, globally minded, about not only the dangers, but also what we need to know more about this new idea of deep sea mining. So I found an incredible individual called Pradeep Singh. Now, yes, of course, and we'd be very happy we share the same surname. Chances are we're from the same village in India, although in Punjab. But Pradeep has got a phenomenal background to him. He's going to help guide us through some of the research he's been doing, but also some of the big existential questions at play. But before then, a quick note from our dear sponsors. If you want to find out more about the Global Indian series, by the way, well, it couldn't be easier. Simply come to the website, which is www.globalindianseries.com. There you can listen to this podcast and the entire repertoire of discussions so far.
Hi, this is Dharmesh Shingala, co-founder of Novus. At Novus, we believe technology leads the way for a meaningful change. We are on a mission to change the way corporations, governments, and institutions interact with information. Same as the Global Indian podcast, help people transform for a better future. Find out more on how we are inspiring global change, either at the Global Indian Series website or Novus website to learn more about our innovative software solutions. From our family to yours, I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you.
My name is Chitra Stern, and I am a proud Global Indian Ambassador and CEO of Martignal Resorts and Martignal Residences. We pride ourselves on the journeys that define a community, and our developments bring people together. Did you know that over 70,000 people just like us call Portugal home? The Global Indian journey has brought people together in a meaningful way, and on behalf of all of us at Martignal, we want to thank you for joining us in these remarkable conversations. We look forward to seeing you here in Lisbon post-COVID.
Hi, my name is Divya, and I'm co-founder of the Global Indian Podcast. Before you get to today's show, I've got a quick favour to ask. If you've been enjoying our conversations, I'd love if you could take just 1 minute to leave us a review on the platform that you're listening to us on and share our work to friends and family. It helps us out a lot. Word of mouth is the primary way that we grow. Thanks for your continued support.
Pradeep, why don't you run us through a bit about what you do? Because I think it's such an interesting type of area to be involved in.
Well, I'm an academic, so my background is in law and international law, the law of the sea in particular, and I've been working on, deep seabed mining for about 7 years now. I'm currently based in Germany at the Research Institute for Sustainability in Potsdam, where I work on a myriad of ocean governance issues, specifically focus on deep seabed mining and the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity.
And why is that important for you? Why did you choose such a niche area to get involved in?
To some extent, it happened by chance. I went abroad to do my master's, and I did a course in the law of the sea, and then came across this topic of deep seabed mining, which really captured my attention. Such a perhaps outlandish activity that's being discussed and has sort of been talked about already. You'd be surprised, but for over 50 years, and a regime has sort of been developed to look into deep seabed mining already since the 60s and 70s, the 1960s and 70s, that is. And so that really captured my attention, and I decided to, further my studies in this, and also, enrolled in a PhD program, basically to focus on the law of the sea, to look at how regimes work with the case study of deep seabed mining.
Wow, hang on, you're saying over 50 years that this has been in the making of the ideas of deep sea mining?
Oh, yes. Well, actually, the first discovery of deep sea minerals that was discovered actually in somewhere around 1870 by the HMS Challenger. So that's a really long time ago. But for about a century after that, no one really talked about deep seabed mining because it was not thought to be feasible. But then in the 1960s, the discussion started to become more lively. There were, some theories out there that, it would soon be possible that these resources can be extracted. And the debate that ensued back then in the 1960s, with more and more developing countries starting to gain independence, they were actually concerned that industrialized and developed states would be the ones that would be, would have the technologies and the capacity to actually access these resources and extract them, and then developing countries would be left behind. So there were discussions that actually took place in the 1960s at the United Nations, where developing countries particularly were sort of pushing for a regime that these resources, these mineral resources of the deep seabed, should be considered as common heritage, that developed countries should not be extracting them at the expense of developing countries, and we should sort of agree on a system on how these resources can be accessed and the benefits from it can be sort of shared.
So run us through, what on earth is deep sea mining? Because when it comes to mind, I was in Zambia a long time ago, and you hear about the copper part disaster that took place there. And again, you can hear about certain instances happening right the way across the globe, and that's above shore. But run me through on your side, what is deep sea mining?
So essentially, when we say deep seabed mining, the reference is, sort of mining at, ocean depths of about 200 meters and deeper. So anything that goes deeper than 200 meters, that's basically considered the deep ocean. And that's essentially, when we say deep seabed mining, we're talking about mining at depths greater than that. There are three main types of resources that are of, current interest. The first is polymetallic nodules. These are located at abyssal plains at average depths of between 3,000 to 5,000 meters. And they contain, metals such as nickel, cobalt, copper, and manganese. And then you have polymetallic sulfides, again, quite similar metal contents, but these are located at hydrothermal vents, usually at depths greater than 1,000 meters. And then the third resource type are cobalt-rich ferromanganese crusts, and these are found at seamount areas, also containing similar metals, particularly cobalt. And so these are the three main resources that are currently, sort of being the subject of interest for deep seabed mining. And, one final point to add on this is that these resources are, can be found in areas within national jurisdiction. So essentially the continental shelf of coastal states, but a larger or more substantial amount of these resources are actually found on the international seabed area. So areas beyond the limits of national jurisdiction. And these resources have been designated as the common heritage of humankind. And an international body actually has been set up to administer and look after these resources. This international body is called the International Seabed Authority, and it's based in Kingston, Jamaica. And negotiations are actually on the way at the moment, and we'll be meeting again next month in July to continue negotiations on a set of regulations to govern how these resources should be exploited. Exploration has been going on at the International Seabed through the International Seabed Authority for about 2 decades plus now, but there has not been any exploitation as of yet.
So what do you think the world needs to know about? We have many heads of state that receive the podcast every single week. And when you hear about a chance, an opportunity to say, hey, as an economy, as an island-based economy, where tourism has been disrupted because of COVID, and everyone's looking for COVID recovery. The ideas of loaning out your deep sea for miners to do their work and make residual income sounds like a really good idea on the surface of things, but I'm guessing is laden with a lot of dangers. So, Pradeep, run my ignorant brain through what are some of the potential dangers that's at risk here, and how does it impact people?
You're absolutely right that on the surface of it, it looks like, oh, wow, this is something that we should explore and consider utilizing as part of the blue economy. But the more you read about it and the more you speak to scientists and sort of understand the actual implications of seabed mining, that would lead you to think twice or thrice, even before considering or contemplating such an activity. So we know very little about the deep ocean at the moment. I mean, our knowledge has improved over the years, but we still know very little about the deep ocean. You know, some people like to say that we know more about the moon or outer space than the deep seabed, you know, so we know very little about the deep seabed. But the little that we know at present, knowledge gives us the sort of understanding that it plays a very important role. The deep sea plays an important role in regulating the climate. So, you know, the fact that we are here today having this stable climate, to some extent, of course, there is climate change, but to some extent, it's all thanks to the deep ocean and the role that the deep ocean plays in regulating the climate. It also performs a lot of other ecosystem services, and it sustains the food web, the marine food web that we have today. So when deep seabed mining sort of happens, we are talking about significant environmental implications and impacts. So we will have direct impacts on the seabed area where the extraction occurs. In the case of polymetallic nodules, we are essentially talking about dredging those areas to collect the nodules. And in the case of sulfides and seamounts, that would involve cutting of this deposits in order to retrieve and extract the resources and then to bring it up to the surface. So we have direct impacts on the seafloor, the seabed itself, and then there will also be impacts when the sort of, you know, the lifting of the deposits are done, basically from the seabed to
the debris will ultimately drop, and it's
yeah, and then we will have onboard processing on the ship. So the shipboard processing, and then there will be then discharge of the waste that goes back deep down into the ocean. And there we'll again have another layer of environmental implications. And then these resources would be brought to shore, and then we would have processing going on. And the processing methods would not be similar to ores that we get onshore. So we would have a new set of sort of environmental implications also coming out from the processing that happens on land. Essentially, this is, or at least scientists are now sort of saying that it's going to be quite a destructive activity because we're talking about mining in a liquid environment. So sediment plumes, these can, you know, range, or the plumes that are sort of the sediment disturbation that happens could actually spread for quite a distance. And, you know, underwater noise, these could actually affect marine life, underwater light as well. So, you know, this part of the deep ocean, they're not used to getting any sort of light at all. And suddenly there's just going to be 24/7 noise and light and these sort of pollutions that we know nothing really about, and how this would sort of, you know, affect marine life, including marine mammals, because I mentioned one of the resources is located at seamounts, and seamounts are known to attract marine life and mammals as well. And so this could be potentially destructive. Not to also sort of finally mention that I mentioned the links to the sustenance of the marine food web and fisheries, and there are quite a few coastal countries that are actually very concerned about the impacts of deep seabed mining and how that would affect fisheries closer to shores within their national waters, and that could actually be quite significant. Recent data sort of suggesting
we know that there
this.
are concerns in the Caribbean where there's a lot of fish now that are having far more traces of mercury than ever before.
Yeah.
And so now the fact that people will be digging up, dredging up the oceans, we don't know what else is released, but it does find its way into the food web. And so therefore then are
Yes.
we now essentially shooting ourselves in the foot because our own sources of food or sustenance from the oceans are now going to be disturbed, that we don't know what the long-term impact of this is going to be? Why would you think governments would be eager then to meet in Kingston, Jamaica, an economy that has already been failing anyway under the current administration, to sign up quite quickly on an agreement that would enable mining institutions to come in? Like, what am I missing here?
Before going into that, you're right, and there is this potentiality of heavy toxic materials being released also from deep seabed mining activities that could then find its way into the marine food web, and then eventually to the seafood that we consume. Well, the reason, I guess, why countries or some countries are eager to see this regulations be adopted is because there are a few private industry players that are pushing and are trying to make this happen. But I would also sort of add that there are, a growing number of countries that are actually resisting this. And you have, in the last 12 months, more and more countries that have sort of come out and called for a moratorium or to call for a pause, basically, in this transition from exploration of seabed minerals to exploitation of seabed minerals. And they're essentially saying that the science is not ready. We are not prepared to regulate this activity. We cannot ensure the effective protection of the marine environment, as well as to sort of ensure that it can be done in a responsible way. And so we have this growing number of countries, maybe now somewhere around 16, and I expect this number to keep growing even until next month, where this important meeting happens, because actually there is a deadline that has been imposed on the International Seabed Authority to complete the regulations by the 9th of July. We know this is not going to happen because the next time the Council of the International Seabed Authority meets, that would be on the 10th of July, ironically. So that deadline is not going to be met. But then discussions are now going on what would happen if the regulations are not complete and an application for exploitation activities come in.
What is the counter argument to all of this?
To deep seabed mining?
Yeah.
Well, the counter argument is basically to sort of wait for more science in order to allow the International Seabed Authority and also national regulators, in the case of seabed mining within national jurisdiction, to actually come up with regulations that are fit for purpose. Because at the moment, we clearly lack the science and the knowledge to be able to sort of implement an effective regime. And so there are a lot of, scholars like myself, but also scientists that are saying we should use this time now to focus on marine scientific research to close the knowledge gaps in order to allow us to basically come up with more robust regulations, as well as standards and guidelines, as well as other sort of forms of regulatory controls. How should the International Seabed Authority exercise control over mining entities, private mining companies that could be based in various jurisdictions, and perhaps even have dubious arrangements in terms of their setup and things like that,
which we've seen before, haven't we? It's there's quite a few examples.
Yes.
The mining industry is turning around and saying, look, doing this beneath the sea gives us an opportunity to be doing more effective mining. Obviously, there's a cost implication, but as the whole world is gearing up for more electronic vehicles, rather than having things above land, it's going to be far more simpler and a lot more long-term generation of produce for us all. Now, you're saying, well, that's a great argument, but then you're also saying you believe by doing deep sea mining, we're just going to see an even further push of mining activity above ground to meet the demand. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I see it as in, adding a new source of competition to the commodities market. So if we're adding and opening up this new source, we would actually increase pressure on terrestrial mining. So the terrestrial mining countries, they're not going to put their hands together and say, okay, deep seabed miners, you are here now, you take over, and we are going to stop.
You have saved the world as we know it. Please remove my profits. Yeah, absolutely.
It's not going to happen. They're going to double down. They might even reduce their environmental requirements or, labor and other social requirements in order to have a more competitive edge of things. And then we'll end up in a situation where we see more of the same old problems on land, but in addition, new problems at sea. And I don't think that would really solve any of the problems that we have right now in terms of sourcing for metals and things like that. We'll just see an influx of metals. Yeah.
What's your biggest fear? Because you must see something in the future in the next 10, 15, 20 years that is almost scaring you beyond belief in order to take active action right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, my biggest fear is that, once we allow the activity to start, then it's going to be difficult to turn back. And, we would just then have to, deal with all the burdens that come in. And in this, I think, there is actually growing evidence to suggest that, the benefits might be reaped by, a small number of mining companies that are essentially based in developed countries. But the burdens of deep seabed mining is going to be, basically taken up by developing countries due to the connectivity nature of the oceans. It's going to come back to developing countries in Africa and in South Asia and others that would actually feel the brunt of deep seabed mining activities that happen, even though they happen that far out. But because of the ocean connectivity and the way things work, developing countries would be then, be forced to bear the burdens of deep seabed mining, and yet see none of the benefits that would come out of it. And I think that's my greatest fear at the moment, that this, issue of equity or ocean equity would only further deepen, and developing countries would then be again, forced to bear all these burdens that come out of deep seabed mining. Yeah.
That's interesting. And on a personal front, because to dedicate over 7 years of your life towards the cause of deep sea mining, now I'm imagining that takes a lot of effort. In between that, was there ever a moment in time that you thought, what on earth am I doing? It's
yeah, no, that tends to happen every now and then. But I do realize, I mean, my interest is more from an academic perspective anyway, although, it's hard to not get involved in what's happening. So I do attend the meetings of the International Seabed Authority. I've been attending for I guess the last 4 years or something like that. I've been to Kingston maybe 6 times now for ISA meetings. What I particularly find very gratifying at the moment is that states have sort of started to be more alert about the issue, because of where we find ourselves at this point, where exploration has been going on but no exploitation, and now there is this sudden push by 1 or 2 small private mining companies that want to do deep seabed mining, and it appears that they are dragging the entire international community along and sort of saying, hey, let us start mining activities. And that is the one that I guess particularly woke up a lot of states and sort of saying that, hey, hang on for a minute, we're not ready at this moment. And that is very gratifying, because it's sort of like, the work that I've been trying to do as an academic for years, states were, I guess, listening, but, it wasn't on top of their list. And now finally, with this, sort of push for deep seabed mining to happen this year or even next year, states have suddenly realized that this is not a good idea. And they've been critical about, allowing it to happen anytime soon. So yeah, no, that kept me going. Yeah.
if when you look back at the 7 years experience, academic experience within this, how has it changed your perception of being on this planet? Has it changed the way that you look at the planet, changed the way that you look at identity, for example?
Absolutely. And I guess something that we, didn't really get to touch on before this is the cultural connection that some societies actually have with the ocean and with the deep ocean. And, I've had the privilege to speak to a lot of representatives that come from Pacific Islands, and they basically sort of impressed upon me that it's not just the environmental impacts and things like that. These areas are quite sacred to us and to our cultures and things like that. And imagine such areas being desecrated by deep seabed mining. So actually, yes, to a very large extent, that actually changed my perception about the planet and about how things work, about consumption, and things, and consumption, I should say, and how we should actually be sort of like looking at ways to sort of maybe have more with less. And we do actually have new innovations and things like that about, developing technologies, clean technologies, using less metals, and new innovation, including, perhaps having batteries without cobalt and things like that. And I think that's something that we should also consider more seriously before we open up, the deep seabed for, extraction. Yeah.
That's interesting. Pradeep, if people want to find out more about the work that you do, where can they go to?
Well, they can go to the website of the Institute, so Research Institute for Sustainability Potsdam, or RIFS Potsdam, and you should be able to find out more about me and my work on deep seabed mining. You could also look up at web pages of the IUCN, for example, and I'm also part of the IUCN's independent commissions where I advise them on deep seabed mining, and so you could also look up on the website of the IUCN and search deep seabed mining, or maybe just Google my name as well, and you'll probably see more. Pradeep Singh, deep seabed mining. I always make this joke that I work on deep seabed mining because I have the deep in my name, Pradeep. So
it was meant to be.
So,
wasn't
yeah,
it?
I'm also. My handle on Twitter is Pradeep C. So yeah.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Pradeep, it has been a real pleasure to have you on the show. And thank you so much for helping us understand more about some of the key issues at play. I'm sure that this is the first of many more conversations to come.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Well, that's a bit of a chilly warning, isn't it? It's the whole world of deep sea mining. I've got a feeling we're going to take a deeper dive into this, excuse the pun, to understand more from the different perspectives of thought leaders, but also maybe some of the businesses involved here. There has to be more than meets the eye. I suppose as part of the human journey of us, as Pradeep rightly said, it's our idea of consumption or overconsumption that is creating all these marketplaces, but more importantly, creating the deep issues that the planet is facing. And regardless of what ethnicity or nationalist viewpoint that we have, one thing is undeniable, that we are all parts of the same human race. Anyway, well, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to you traveling with us next week as we continue our global voyage of self-discovery, understanding people, places, opportunities, and the human experience behind our perceptions of identity. Until then, stay well.
Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com.